So I recently uploaded a video in which I was complaining about being disenfranchised, which is true. I'm not going to be able to vote in the upcoming UK election, despite my best efforts. But a few commenters raised the question, well, why do you care? I mean, why does it matter whether or not you can vote anyway? Why bother voting? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, about what my motivations are. I mean, really, I think there are two questions here. So first of all, is there any reason to care which party succeeds? I mean, in the UK, at least in my constituency, and I suppose nationally as well, it's between Labour and the Conservatives. Should I care? Should it matter to me which of those get in? And then the second question is well, is voting going to make any difference? So first of all, first question: should I care which party succeeds? Well, suppose we say no, right? Suppose I was to say that it just doesn't matter at all which party is victorious. It seems to me that this is going to require endorsing one of the following propositions. So we're either going to have to say that there will be no policy difference whatsoever between these two parties, right? So these two parties, whichever one gets in, they're just going to enact exactly the same policies. Or we would have to say that, okay, fine, the parties are going to have different policies, but the policies that they enact are such that they will make no difference to me, one way or the other. And both of those propositions strike me as extremely implausible. Like, so here's the thing, right? I can totally get on board with the idea that ultimately none of these parties are, working in our interests, where our is supposed to include me, I suppose. I mean, ultimately, like, look, they're going to be working in their own interests, or they're working in the interests of certain elite groups. But I mean, here's the thing: whoever's interests, whichever group those parties are actually working for, it seems that to me that my interests may align to a greater degree with one of those groups. So, for instance, if we if ultimately we say that, look, these parties are just they're working in the interests of the elites, well, it seems like, okay, there's going to be some of the elites who may be concerned about things like climate change, because actually they want to have a sort of comfortable environment going forward for their children. And then there's going to be other elites who just don't really care about that. They're just more interested in maximizing profits for oil companies or whatever. So, it looks like there might well end up being a situation where even among the groups that those parties are really working for, we end up getting significant policy differences. Or just think about things like, religion, right? I mean, there are some elites who are secular, some elites who are religious, and that's going to make a difference. Or, LGBT rights, things like that. Does it make a difference which party succeeds? I mean, it seems like, surely, well, yeah, it does. I mean, we can just look at, just look, right? Just look at what happens when different parties gain power. It does seem to make a difference. I mean, in the UK, we had the mini budget from our previous Prime Minister, Liz Truss, that kind of tanked the economy and sent mortgage rates through the roof. That makes a difference. In the US, I mean, you can look at things like it seems to make a difference who's sitting on the Supreme Court, and then the people that are sitting on the Supreme Court are going to be decided by the whichever party is victorious. Like, if I'm a woman, I'm probably going to care quite a lot about whether or not I can access abortion services. I guess if I'm a fetus, maybe I'm going to care quite a lot about whether I can be killed. But no, I mean, you get the point, right? It just seems to me like, well, yeah, it does. There is a difference. There is a difference between these options. Maybe not as much of a difference as I would like. Maybe none of these parties are really working in the interests of the people. But there's still a difference. So I'm still going to have some concern about which one is victorious. So that's the first question. Then the second question is, okay, so given that I have given that I care about which party is victorious, can I do anything about it? Is my vote going to make a difference? And I suppose here is where it becomes very tricky to sort of give anything like a sort of utilitarian justification, at least, for bothering to go out and vote. Because obviously my vote is just one among millions, and you just don't. I don't think there has ever been a major election, at least in my country, which has been decided on the basis of one vote. If I choose not to vote, that's not going to make a difference. There is so there was an interesting point that was raised by one of my YouTube commenters, and I can't remember who this was. This was a couple of years ago that I saw this, so sorry, I can't remember the name. But so there's two approaches to decision theory. There's causal decision theory and evidential decision theory. Well, I mean, there are possibly some others, but those are the sort of popular ones. Those are the big ones, right? Causal decision theory says that you ought to take the action that will causally produce the best outcome. Evidential decision theory says that you ought to take the action which, conditional on the action occurring, maximizes the probability of the best outcome. Now, in the majority of cases, causal decision theory and evidential decision theory are going to tell you to do the same thing, but they can come apart. And I think the way that the distinction between these two options is standardly illustrated is with Newcomb's paradox. So in Newcomb's paradox, you have to basically, we imagine this situation, right? You're sent into a room where there are two boxes, and one box is opaque, you can't see inside it. The other box is transparent, and there is £1,000 available in that box. Now, within the opaque box, there might be £1 million, or there might not be. And the question is, do you take both boxes, or do you take only the opaque box? Well, it seems very obvious what to do, but here's the thing. Whether the £1 million is in the opaque box, this has been decided by a very powerful predictor, okay? The very powerful predictor makes predictions about people's behavior, and she gives the correct prediction like 99.999% of the time, right? She's extremely reliable predictor. And if the predictor has predicted that you will take one box, that you will take only the opaque box, then she has placed the million in it. If the predictor predicted that you will take both boxes, then she has left the opaque box empty. So now, what do you do? So, I mean, ultimately, right, the situation is this. Once you enter that room, the boxes are fixed. Nothing that you do once you enter the room is going to have any causal influence on, on whether the £1 million is in that box, right? Your decision, once you're in the room, your decision to take both boxes, that's not going to make the £1 million disappear, right? It's either there or it isn't. On the other hand, it is the case that pretty much everybody who takes one box gets the £1 million, and pretty much everybody who takes two boxes gets the 1,000. So this really sort of illustrates this difference between causal decision theory and evidential decision theory. Causal decision theory will tell you to take both boxes, because from the point of view of causal decision theory, look, there's nothing you can do to causally influence what's in the boxes. If you take only one box, then you're just leaving £1,000 on the table. On the other hand, evidential decision theory will say, well, if you take one box, that's going to maximize the probability of getting the million, right? You're almost certainly going to be getting the million if you take one box, even though you have no causal influence over it. So personally, I've always been a hardcore one boxer. I mean, two boxing has just always struck me as completely crazy, right? But there's lots of people who defend it, and so it's. But for me, I'm a one boxer. Anyway, it was pointed out to me that, well, if you're a one boxer, right, if you're attracted to evidential decision theory, then it looks like you could reason in this kind of way about voting. You could say, well, look, if I choose to vote a particular way, then this should raise my credence that people like me will vote in the same way, right? So the very fact that I am actually bothering to go out and vote, that makes it more likely that anybody else in the country who is sufficiently like me is also going to go out and vote. On the other hand, if I choose to just, I can't be bothered with that, I'm staying home, well, then that should raise my credence that people like me are going to be like, yeah, I can't be bothered with that, I'm staying home. And here's the thing, right? If I think that there are a sufficient number of people like me, then maybe that would be enough people to actually make a difference to the election result. Especially if I'm living in a constituency which is close, right? Like if it's going to be decided on the basis of a few hundred votes, if it's on a knife edge, then the fact that I'm going out to vote, that raises my credence that people like me will also vote in the same way, and maybe that is enough to make a difference. So, from the point of view of evidential decision theory, I should go out and vote, even though my vote is not going to have any causal influence over these other people. It's not that my vote is going to causally make them. I'm not like making them go out and vote, but that's irrelevant from the point of view of evidential decision theory. So, this is just a perspective that I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know really whether that works, but I thought that was sort of a cool way to look at it. And so yeah, I'll put that on the table. But look, let me just grant, for the sake of argument, that none of that really does work. And so let's just say, yeah, voting isn't going to make a difference, right? My personal vote. My decision to go out and vote, that's not going to make a difference. And it's also such that it's not even going to raise my credence that other people are going to vote in a similar way or anything like that, right? So this is just if my goal is to sort of, well, how do I sort of maximize my utility, or even how do I maximize the utility of people in general, it really does look like voting is completely pointless. But I think the thing is, though, is that, like, why are we assuming that like maximizing utility is the right way of looking at this? I mean, for me, when I think about like what I should do, what kind of person I want to be, I don't think I really view things in that way. I mean, I think that I tend to view things more in the following sort of way. I sort of like to act in such a way that if everybody else acted in that way, things would be better. So. For example, very simple example of this. Let's say that there's a field, right, and lots of people are using the field, and the field is therefore being degraded. Well, we can all sort of get together and kind of say, hey, look, let's why don't we all just agree that each of us will only use the field once a week, right? So I'm gonna sort of sacrifice. I'm gonna take a kind of personal sacrifice, as long as everybody else is also taking that personal sacrifice, and that will mean that the field remains in good shape, right? The thing is I think if there was a sort of social convention where everybody was in agreement that each of us is only going to use this field once a week, so that we can ensure that it won't be degraded. Look, I could reason in this way. I could think to myself, well, look, I'm only one person. If I chose to break that convention and just go out to the field every day, it wouldn't really make any difference. So why don't I, so I could just go and do that. If my goal is just to maximize my own utility, I could just go do that. But I don't want to. I don't want to be that kind of person. Right? I want to like act in such a way that, like, yeah, if everybody else is acting in that way, that's going to produce the best outcome. Like, that is the way in which sort of utility tends to influence my reasoning. I mean, similarly, it's the same reason why I tend to be, much more strongly in favor of pacifism than I think most people are. A lot of people think pacifism is, so I generally tend to be very, very, anti-war, anti-violence. And a lot of people think, well, this is just idealistic. It's actually such that because we live in a world where there are lots of people who are violent, and there is lots of war, and there are these threats, you have to, if you're a pacifist, then that's just going to make the outcome worse. But that's not the point, right? The point is if everybody else was like me, things would be so much better. And that's the kind of person I want to be. And this is a fundamental value. I don't really know if I can justify this way of thinking. But then, I mean, the same goes for the more utilitarian way of looking at things, right? If you say that you ought to act in such a way that maximizes utility, well, I think at least for a lot of people, I mean, maybe you can come up with justifications for it, but I think for a lot of people that is, again, just a more sort of fundamental value. Yeah, if if you take the view that you should just act in such a way that, just do whatever action is going to maximize utility, if that's your way of reasoning about things, then you're going to say that voting is completely pointless. But if you view things more from the point of view that I am more attracted to, where it's about, no, I want to be a more ideal agent. I want to act in such a way that, like, if everyone else was acting in that way, things would be best. Or, I want to act in such a way that, like, if I was the only one making the decision, things would be best. If you view things from that point of view, well, look, given the structure of the political system, I can see that it would be better if a certain party won. So yeah, I'm going to vote for that party. Because I can think, look, I'd be better off if everybody else was voting for that party. So that's what I'm going to do. So maybe that gives you some insight into some of my thoughts about voting. The truth of the matter is, despite everything I've just said, the reason why I go out to vote is because, my mum always made me do it. My mum always talked about, whenever there was like an election, I remember my mum would always talk about the significance of going out to vote. She'd always talk about how people fought for the right to vote. She'd always, talk about the value of democracy. And my mum wasn't particularly politically active, but I remember being when I became 18, it became possible for me to vote, and every time there was any kind of election, she'd always say, "Look, you got to go out. You got to go and do the voting thing, or I won't make you dinner tonight." So I think that the ritual was just sort of ingrained into me ever since I was a kid. And honestly, I just kind of enjoy the ritual of it. I also just enjoy following the election results. It's probably similar, really, to how some people enjoy following football and other sorts of sports, right? So, I like to participate in the ritual, and then I like to see how my team has done. That's the honest truth. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thanks for watching, everybody.